You're listening to Radigan's Rockcast, a series focused on talking about music from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and even current. Now, here's your host, Tom Radigan.
What's going on, guys? Welcome to Radigan's Rockcast. I am, of course, your host, Tom Radigan. Thank you for tuning on, whether that is on WMYO, Anchor, Castos, Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube, wherever it is. I am glad you are on. Today I want to talk about, one of the most legendary musicians out there. The greatest of all times. You all know who he is. He was known as the King of Pop, and that is Michael Jackson. Today we're going to be talking about MJ's big album, not Thriller. We're talking about Off the Wall. The reason why Off the Wall is so important and so prolific and just such a, something that needs to be recognized is it was Michael Jackson's first record that showed him as, a songwriter and, singer, where people could really take him serious, and out of that Jackson 5, a kid doing ABC and I Want You Back, it worked really well with the production of Quincy Jones, and it's an album that needs to be mentioned. It came out in 1979, and, definitely has still, because in the late 70s, disco music was a big thing, and it definitely has that, especially, with him being with the Jacksons and all that stuff. There were certain, the year before he released an album with his brothers, and it had songs like, Blame It on the Boogie and Shake Your Body Down to the Ground, and that was on the album Destiny. That album really showed them as, songwriters in all sense, because, for a while, because the Jacksons were known as, like, this kid group, and then, during the 70s, it's like, I think people were, wondering, what's new with them? We kind of already get who they are. But, they were able to, be different and be more serious as musicians by, writing their own music, having more say in their production. And, it worked especially with this album, Off the Wall. I mean, of course, the most essential tracks on this and the 4 singles are, Rock With You, Don't Stop Till You Get Enough, She's Out of My Life, and, of course, the self-titled track, Off the Wall. And then, of course, there's actually, it was also a single, too, on this album, which is Girlfriend, which is the song that Paul McCartney wrote for Jackson, which, of course, later on, they would do some songs together, and all that. But, so, I guess, without further ado, let's talk about, this wonderful album. So, as I mentioned, so Michael Jackson, this was his 5th studio album, but it was really his first album that really people took him seriously with. So, it had the production of Quincy Jones on it. Quincy Jones, I think, met Jackson when, because in 78, he did the film The Wiz with Cindy Lumet. And, Quincy Jones did the music for that and was involved in behind the scenes with that. And, they ended up collaborating, and, Quincy Jones became, Michael Jackson's famous producer, helping him with that, create that sound and that just, that sound that everybody wanted, and that sound that made Jackson, of course, bigger than he was before, because he was already big, like I said, being with the group, the Jackson 5, he was already a child star. But with this album, just showed that he could be the biggest, not just child star, but he could be the biggest he could be the biggest singer in the world, honestly. And this album showed that he was up there. Like, he was only 21, actually, and, he was already, by this album, he was up there with Springsteen, Paul McCartney, like the Beatles, Elvis, Buddy Holly, just all those musicians. He was there. Like the time the Beatles, when they came out, with their albums and all that stuff, and when they came to America, in all that sense, this was a start of that, of him having the major success and really people taking him serious as a musician. And of course, songs that he wrote. An interesting thing that I found out later, which I was able to get more respect for Michael Jackson too, is finding out that he did a lot of the backing vocals for his songs, and especially on this album. So let's talk about the first song on this album and the first single, which was "Don't Stop Till You Get Enough," and definitely it's got that disco beat. Like definitely just like interesting guitar riffs and all stunts. Definitely started that sound that we would hear elevate throughout the 1980s with his music and just in general in all that sense. Definitely has that disco vibe. Just like you can definitely tell this is a late 70s record and all that, and it works. It's not my it's definitely a great song. It's not my favorite Michael Jackson song, but it works pretty well. I've always liked it. I think it does. I think it does work. The beat is catchy. The vocals are catchy. He's doing it all in he sings this all in falsetto. It just works pretty well. It's got that funk riff that ends the song and all that stuff that works pretty well, like the yeah, and the video worked well for it, the music video, and all that, which we would see music videos elevate to throughout the 1980s and all that, then the next track we got on this is "Rock With You," which I would probably consider my favorite Michael Jackson song. I think "Rock With You" is just such an interesting song because I remember hearing a lot about Michael Jackson, definitely knowing more about him when he died in 2009. And I would hear, these songs from Thriller, but a song I would hear a lot was "Rock With You," and that was on, of course, this album. This was not, and it was just, it's such an interesting song, because I feel like in some ways it's ahead of its time, because I feel like, "Rock With You" doesn't even, I feel like in a sense, sound so much like a 70s song. It's got its own category to it. I think, it definitely has, because, with "Don't Stop Till You Get Enough," you feel the disco vibe and all that stuff. And not to say with "Rock With You," you don't, but you just feel like more of, an original, it's kind of more of an original song from Jackson, even though the funniest thing is "Don't Stop Till You Get Enough" was written by Michael Jackson, is credited to just Michael Jackson. "Rock With You" was credited to Rod Temperton, who wrote a few songs for Jackson, and of course he actually even wrote "Thriller" and all that. Rod Temperton wrote a few songs for him on this album as well. This song just works so well. I've always loved it. I feel like it's definitely, when you listen to it, it can take you back to specific times. I remember listening to it, and I remember listening to it in high school, and it took me back to childhood. And the funniest thing is I never even really listened to that song that much in childhood, but it just has some kind of quality that can just take you back to, I think, happy memories in your life and all that sense. And it works. The video, you could tell that music videos were still trying to figure out how they are and all that. "Don't Stop Till You Get Enough" has a little bit more of a, an interesting, more of a, visually appealing music video with a lot happening. "Rock With You" is just Michael Jackson in flashy clothes, sitting in a dark, room with a glow light and all that sense. I've always loved that, and it is so catchy. Definitely, I would consider "Rock With You" probably one of his best songs of all time, honestly, up there with songs like "Thriller" and "Beat It." The one thing that I wanted to point out with this album is that some people will say that rock people will say that "Off the Wall" is better than "Thriller," and a few years ago I probably would have said the same thing. In some ways, I don't know now. I think Off the Wall and "Thriller," when you listen to them, they're both two different albums, and they both are both of a success in all sense. I do think when people talk about "Thriller" and "Bad," "Off the Wall" is something I think completely is better than "Bad." I don't even think of that as a thing, because everybody will always be like, "Oh, what's a better album?" Some people say "Thriller" or "Bad." I don't even look at it like that way. I look at what's a better album, "Thriller" or "Off the Wall." really, because honestly, this album is, I think, just something that is just so perfect. And it's interesting too that from people I know who might, like a friend of mine who is a drummer and a YouTuber I watch who is into, like, basically has the same taste that I'm into when it comes to rock. It's interesting that a lot of people, look at Off the Wall as a better album in that sense. And, there's something to be said about that. I mean, especially still, it was coming from the 19s. This album is a 70s album. Even though Michael Jackson became, and is known as the biggest 1980s artist, this came out at the end of the decade. And, it still has that, it has a lot of this, what was going on in the 70s in it, and it just works. And of course that works with the other two songs. I mean, most of the songs on this album are disco based, but like, a song I've always loved too is Working Day and Night, which if they needed another single, this would have probably been it. It works pretty well, definitely with that funk, with the drums and all that stuff. Michael's falsetto. I like, too, how his falsetto interplays with his regular voice, too. Just going into both, like they say that working, but what is love, girl? And then, yeah. And where he goes, and where he just can, just jam out with his vocals and be like, if I'm always out of sight. Yeah. No, and it works well, too. This was a song I would work out to a lot when I was on a machine bike and all that stuff, just pedaling away with, you got me working day and night, But yeah, I don't know. So, the next song on this album, which is, if any song I wouldn't, this is a song that I probably wouldn't consider that highly of, I wouldn't think that highly of, and that's, Get on the Floor. I mean, yeah, it's funk, it's, disco in all sense, but in some ways, I don't know, it's not that I don't think it fits the album, because it does, it's just that I think, it's not for me. It's too much. It also has, these creepy vibes for me, the way the melody is. I just think it's a little too, honestly, that's the thing I find interesting, is that I kind of get creeped out by the melody of it, and with his voice in that sense, too. I just don't think the melody, yeah, it kind of has, a little bit of a haunted aspect to it, in a sense. I don't know. And then, of course, the fifth song, of course, is Off the Wall. And that is always great, because the funniest thing is I didn't hear that song until, probably high school, and I already knew who Michael Jackson was at that point. I knew that there was an album called Off the Wall. I did not know that there was an actual song, too, also called Off the Wall, too, when I listened to it. And, and I was like, oh, yeah, this is just as good as Rock With You or Don't Stop Till You Get Enough. Yeah, and I think it worked perfectly. I think, Michael's voice, you can hear throughout it. He's just really, you could hear his voice and his presence all over this album. Honestly, too, I think Michael just, it seems, had this natural voice, even if, if Michael wasn't even in the mood, you could tell that he could probably get it 100%, and make it sound like, he was fully into it, which, I'm not saying he wasn't, with making this album, but it's just, that's what the kind of vibe I get from this, is that even if Michael Jackson wasn't at his best, it still sounds like 100%, and all that sense. It's just it works, and I just love that. And then, of course, we got the sixth song on this album. The sixth track is Girlfriend, and that was written by Paul McCartney. And Paul McCartney actually wrote that for Michael Jackson. And the funniest thing is, he also released it on his album that came out in '78 and all that. That had I think that was the same album as With a Little Luck. I think it was London Tower, I think. I'm, just trying to get that. So, whatchamacallit? Yeah. It was written by Paul McCartney. He did it on London Town. He sang it in falsetto, I think, thinking, for Michael Jackson. And the funniest thing is, Quincy Jones heard McCartney's version on that album and thought that would be perfect for Michael, not knowing that Michael already was going to do it because the song was written for him. He didn't know that. And, the funniest thing, though, is when I listen to this song, it's interesting because Paul's version is really, honestly, you can't listen to it. I can't listen to it because, with his falsetto, it's so high. I mean, you could tell that he had Michael Jackson in mind for the song. But, the funniest thing, though, is when I hear that song, I can totally hear Paul McCartney do it in the way that Jackson does it. So it's interesting when I hear his song on that album that it sounds so different, And, I think the thing that's interesting is that Jackson is able to make it his own and, not have, all of that Beatle quality to it in a sense. He's able to, just show it as his own, and I like the melody. I think the tone. I mean, it's just everything of it just works so perfectly. I just it's definitely a song I think to jam to on a hot summer day, or just with friends. Just bop your head to. This is an album to dance with friends with. Have a real party with this album. And because you really could. And then of course we got the 7th song on this, which is another great, which I love and I think really highly of, is She's Out of My Life. And it's such an emotional song, and of course that opening orchestral intro and all that, and how Michael just goes into the she's out of my life. It's just, it worked. And in the video too, it works with him just sitting on a stool and just it's it's a song about a guy realizing that he messed up a really great relationship, and he didn't think it through. And I think lines are so great in the song, I don't know whether to laugh or cry, I don't know whether to live or die. And the way Michael just emphasizes on those words and on those lines is just perfect too. Tom Bahler was the one who wrote this, and from the story I heard from my mother was that he I think he wrote this when he was in a relationship, and he realized, and he got out of it, and he realized that he messed up, he messed up a great thing, the best thing that happened to him. And you can totally feel the emotion with Michael in this song. Apparently, too, from what I've just found out, really, is that, it was originally written for Sinatra. And when you think about that, it's Sinatra could not have done this song, especially the way that Michael could do it. It just it works. It's a song for a younger artist. Because Frank Sinatra would have already been close to 70 at this point, and it wouldn't have worked. That same way. This song did what it needed to do, and I think Quincy Jones' production on it is something that you really need to take note of, especially for producers out there that might be watching this program and all that. It's honestly magic too, and especially at the end, I can't the way he just the way he just hangs out on these notes, with lines I kept my love for her deep inside, and it cuts like a knife. And of course a thing that everybody takes note of is when he cries at the end, where he's struggling to say she's out of my life. And people, there was a documentary I remember watching with my mom, and I think that's where she found out the story about the songwriter. This was the story that she told me, apparently, about the songwriter who wrote the song, and all that. But the funny thing was that, so there's the performance of him doing She's Out of My Life, and he's crying and all that sense, and apparently fans were wondering at that time, who was that girl that broke Michael Jackson's heart? Who is he? But the thing, to tell you the truth, is he wasn't really crying over anybody. He apparently, that wasn't even planned, really, from what I've read and from what I remember, from all these years, and what I've just, I've remember reading about that, is that he was so moved by this song that he ended up just choking up at the end. And, Quincy Jones just realized it just, that works, for the song. Like that they didn't, that they didn't mess up. It works perfectly because apparently he'd keep recording, he'd just keep crying, and they're like, and it's like, this would work, and then and it does, it just, and you totally feel the sinner's sadness and have empathy for him, and especially when I like that, like, it was like where you could tell he's crying, where he's just like, that's that's the sign of a person who's just trying to get through the day. No. And it's so interesting to have fans read into that stuff. But, it's just, the thing that's so interesting is that, like, songs really can move people. And, just singing them can just have this strong emotion with you. And that's what music and, the power of music is. And then the eighth song on this album is I Can't Help It. And like Get On the Floor, this is another, I feel, song that's not so memorable. It's a song that, I feel like it's a song definitely to skip. For some reason, too, it also, I feel like, is too much of a haunted melody for me, and it kind of throws me off on it. There's some things that are good about the song, and, like, Michael's voice is great on it. It's just, like, and even listening to it today just made me realize, I'm like, oh, maybe this song isn't as bad as I thought, because, like, I was, like, going to say that, like, in the song, I don't feel it goes anywhere, and, he does good with it, but, it's just a very tame song, and all that stuff. But it works. And then this song that's the ninth song on this album, which is It's the Fallen in Love. And I love this song. And some people will say it's it's corny, or it's a boring song just because it's just very romantic, or just very, not romantic, but like more just very I guess some people would say maybe dull for a Michael Jackson song, for like other songs he did. But I've always liked it. I just think it's so catchy too, and it works so well too. Like the Patty Austin is on it as well. She's the female voice on it, and it's great too. And that like opening, like, it's the falling in love that's making me high. It's just it's just I love it. I think it works great, and how that song actually does move. Like, it's not just dull and stays in one place. Like I Can't Help It. It moves on, and you can just tell there's a beginning, middle, and end to it. And that's a song for you. So definitely another song I love on this album. And a song to close it, which I think is probably Michael Jackson's best closer on an album, which is Burn This Disco Out. And, this was another song. This was written by Rod Temperton as well. Just does it so well with this, definitely has that disco quality to it. It would have been interesting to see how a music video like this for it would be. Like, when I picture this song, I feel like this would be a music video, almost like how Prince did 1999. It works so well, this song, a lot into it, just talk about the whole, movement with disco, DJ spin this sound, there ain't no way you're gonna put us down, we're gonna dance, we're gonna shout, we're gonna burn this disco out. Just works perfectly. And that wraps up this review of this album. I when I listened to it for the first time. I knew some of these songs for years, but when I listened to this album the first time 2 years ago, I definitely loved it. I could see what people were saying about it, and how great it is, and it definitely is another iconic album, and I think definitely one of the greatest albums in modern music history. So that's it. See you guys next time, and like Michael Jackson says, let's burn this disco out.